Chapter 1436. World of Dao Verification opens. The tree of Dao Verification had borne fruit 7 times, and 7 reverse spirit pearls had appeared. They were all fought over by the 7 sects and 12 clans, and the last battle over the 7th Phala of Dao Verification had resulted in the victory of 7 Moons sect. It had been a long time since 7 Moons sect obtained the Phala that some details had been forgotten, but when they thought back on it, they still remembered how treacherous the event had been. Dao Han stood on the dark cloud calmly and stared at the distant sky. A nostalgic look was on his face. It was the 2nd time he participated in the battle of Dao Verification, but this time, he would no longer be the person who would step into the 3rd layer of the shattered dimension. Instead, he would be someone who would assist in the 1st and 2nd layers. He still remembered the first time he had joined the battle of Dao Verification. At that time, he had just joined 7 Moons sect, but due to his amazing potential, he had been given the important task of becoming the person 7 Moons sect would send into the 3rd layer while the others would assist him. During that battle, he killed many people, which earned him a reputation. He slaughtered until blood flowed in rivers, and he had also been heavily wounded. Most of his sect members beside him had died, but in the end, perhaps due to luck, he had managed to obtain the big Phala. He helped 7 Moons sect gain glory it had never had before. Full of excitement, Gu Tai had protected him while he staggered back from the 3rd layer while pursued by many people. The sky was dyed red with blood on his way back, and it followed him right back to 7 Moons sect. From that moment onwards, he was taken in as Gu Tai's disciple and became the youngest great sect master of 7 Moons sect, while Reverse Spirit Pearl was treated as a legacy treasure. Only the great sect elders who led the sect during each generation could obtain it. A long time had passed since then. When he became the Great Master, he often looked at the reversed Spirit Pearl and remembered the faces of his companions before they had died. Right then, he was going to join the battle of Dao Verification once more, but he was no longer the main part of the battle. The main focus had shifted to Su Ming. Dao Han lifted his head and looked at him. When he returns in success, I wonder if he will feel the same sort of sentiment as I do. Dao Han closed his eyes. In his mind, the 3rd layer of the tree of Dao Verification appeared. When he stepped in all those years ago, he was careful and at full guard all along the way. It was a dimension filled with battles to the death. It was a game of survival. Fortunately, due to the cracks in the dimension, the 3rd layer is incredibly unstable, which is why only those who are weaker than Dao Paragons can enter. Once someone becomes a Dao Paragon, it's impossible for them to step inside. They will be rejected. Dao Han opened his eyes, and his expression became calm again. He no longer thought about his past that made him sigh. Xu Zhongfan was also staring at Su Ming. He hesitated for a moment before taking a few steps forward and sitting down cross-legged beside Su Ming. Xu Zhongfan was silent for a moment before he said softly, "Be careful along the way." Su Ming opened his eyes, snapping out of meditation. He looked at Xu Zhongfan. This person had become his master on his own, without asking for Su Ming's permission. Right then, when he observed the man, Su Ming could tell that his concern to him was sincere. Even though Xu Zhongfan cared for his own level of cultivation and kismet, his concern was something Su Ming would remember. There is no need for you to be the first to enter the 3rd dimension. It will only turn you into a target for everyone. Even if you don't obtain the Phala, it's fine. When Xu Zhongfan looked at Su Ming, there was worry on his face. He mulled over it for a moment before he brought out a medicinal core and placed it in Su Ming's hand. This is a Thanatosis core. Once you take it, your body and soul will be destroyed in an hour. If you run into any life and death situations, you can swallow the core, then flee after faking death, Xu Zhongfan said softly. Once he finished speaking, he cast Su Ming a deep glance, then turned around and walked to the back. Su Ming stared at the medicinal core in his hand, then turned his head back to look at Xu Zhongfan before he quietly put away the medicinal core. Soon, another 2 hours passed. While sitting on the cloud, Su Ming could already see the central region of ancient Zong on the ground in the distance. There was an incredibly large city there which remained enormous even when seen from the sky. It was ancient Zong's capital and also the place where Su Ming would return to 2,000-something years later. He still remembered the master of his who looked exactly the same as Xianxia. He once told Su Ming that when he went to the city gate, he would wait there to help solve his final question. As they drew closer to ancient Zong's capital, Su Ming saw that quite a number of cultivators from other sects and clans had already reached the sky above the city. Su Ming did not know any of them, but based on their formations, he could tell that 5 sects and clans had already arrived. They rode on different enchanted treasures. One of them was a huge dragon with 9 heads, another a huge gourd, while some cultivators sat on screens of light. 7 Moons sect was the 6th sect to arrive. No one said anything. The cultivators from the other sects and clans sat meditating on their respective enchanted treasures with closed eyes to rest their minds. When another 2 hours passed, booming sounds echoed in the air. More sects and clans had arrived. Su Ming saw One Dao sect and immortal Qing Han of Azura clan. He also saw the eldest prince surrounded by a group of cultivators in One Dao sect. He was the much younger extermination, but from a certain way, he was a man bearing some resemblance to Lei Chen. At that moment, he was staring at Su Ming coldly. At the instant the two's gazes met, their eyes sparkled with killing intent, and they were as sharp as sword glares. When the two of them moved their gazes away to look at Azura clan, they saw a figure surrounded by fog. It belonged to the second prince, and Su Ming saw him for the first time. At the instant he looked over, he found no signs of familiarity. Su Ming closed his eyes and no longer paid any attention to him. When dusk arrived, all 7 sects and 12 clans were in the sky above ancient Zong's capital. There were millions of cultivators, and they formed a great mighty pressure and enveloped the world. When all the sects and clans arrived, they slowly formed unions by slowly gathering together around 7 Moons sect, One Dao sect, and Azura clan as the foundation. In a moment, the first layer will be activated. When you step into the shattered dimension, don't bother about those so-called unions. They are somewhat tolerable on normal days, but during the battle of Dao verification, we won't be able to stop accidents from happening. That is why once we step into the first shattered dimension, no matter where you are and whether there are people of the same sect around you, just remember that if you have the chance to place your brand on the altars, immediately do so. If you don't, then with the fastest speed possible, head to the gathering spot marked on your jade slips. Jiu Tai's voice echoed in the hearts of the 200,000 cultivators on the cloud. In every single battle of Dao verification, we need to clear the layers one by one. There are 100,000 altars in the first layer, and whichever sect or clan becomes the first to have 50,000 brands on the altar will get to immediately step into the second layer. If no sect or clan gets to leave their brands on 50,000 altars, then 72 hours later, the sect or clan with the most brands will be the first to enter the second layer. The rest is done in the same manner. The sects or clans with less than 10,000 brands will have no right to enter the second layer. I have already made an agreement with the other sects and clans who are in the union with us. They will assist 7 Moons sect with all their strength to ensure that we will be among one of those who will enter the second layer. But do not entirely believe in this promise. We will have to rely on our own strength. Su Ming, do the same thing. Head to the gathering spot as fast as possible. When Jiu Tai's voice echoed in his mind, a weaker murmur suddenly reached Su Ming's ear. If you can head there, then go there, but if you can't, find a place to hide. Great Dao paragons can go to the first layer, so it's very dangerous. As for the second layer, while great Dao paragons cannot enter, Dao paragons will still pose a threat to you. It will be better for you in the third layer. But since this is a competition between the successors, it's not easy to predict things. My real agreement with the other sects who have formed a union with us is not what I told the others, but to use their full strength to suppress all the interferences in the dimensions around you, allowing you to bring those 5 white dogs of yours smoothly into the third layer. We are somewhat confident in this, but if we can do this, One Dao sect and Azura clan can do it as well, so you will have to venture with extra caution into the third layer, Jiu Tai said to Su Ming. When he heard it, his expression stayed calm, and he nodded. At that moment, an orange-red pillar of light suddenly rushed out from the capital city of ancient Zong. It was thousands of feet tall, and it shot straight up from the circle formed by the 7 sects and 12 clans to disappear into the empty space in the sky. A loud bang echoed through ancient Zong's sky. The orange-red pillar of light seemed to have dyed the sky with its color, causing the end of the sky where the pillar of light touched to form a huge orange-red vortex. It rotated with a bang and covered the entire stretch of sky visible to the naked eye. The huge vortex rotated swiftly. When the time it takes for about half an incense to burn passed, the orange-red pillar of light disappeared, and a huge black hole appeared in the vortex in the sky. The tree of Tao verification has appeared, and its fruit has bloomed. All sects and clans, please take care of yourselves. A faint voice with a mighty pressure came from the royal capital of ancient Zong. It echoed in the world, and when all the cultivators heard it, respect appeared on most of their faces, because they knew that the person who spoke was the emperor of ancient Zong, one of the 3 9th-level Tao gods. Su Ming lowered his head to look, since he had a feeling of being watched. It felt like someone in the city below had lifted his head to stare at him. At the instant the emperor of ancient Zong finished speaking, a suction force that could not be described with words enveloped the area and the millions of cultivators from the 7 sects and 12 clans. Long arcs immediately flew out towards the black hole at the center of the vortex. The moment the cultivators of 7 Moons sect were sucked into the black hole, Gu Tai lifted his hands and pushed down at the dark cloud. It crumbled with a bang and turned into 200,000 jade slips that went into the hands of all those from 7 Moons sect, including Su Ming. He too had a jade slip appear in his palm. Use these jade slips to touch the altars. When Gu Tai's voice rang out in their ears, they were swept into the black hole in the vortex. Millions of figures charged forward, which created an astonishing sight. Su Ming moved, and the feng shui compass beneath him disappeared. With the 5 white dogs in tow, he went with the countless figures beside him into the black hole in the vortex. Chapter 1437. Snatch the altars. At the instant Su Ming stepped into the black hole while being swept up by the suction force from the vortex, his vision blurred, but it swiftly passed away. When his eyes became clear, he saw a desolate wasteland. Countless shattered stones floated in midair, and there were countless cracks on the ground. Some parts of the ground had already crumbled, and the sky was no longer blue, but gray. When Su Ming looked around, he saw no plants in the area, only a thick wave of aura of death. It was continuously spreading over the ground. The 5 white dogs beside Su Ming had gone missing, but he still had a connection with them in his heart. They could also sense Su Ming and were swiftly heading towards him. Right before Su Ming was a floating rock that was about 10,000 feet big. There was a simple altar on it which had 9 layers but looked very broken. Atop it was a tree that seemed to have been petrified. If anyone took a closer look, they would see that it had 9 branches, and at the end of each branch was a butterfly. When Su Ming at the altar, his eyes shone, and he instantly charged forward. When he closed in, he landed on the altar and stared at the petrified tree with burning eyes. Most of his attention was on the 9 butterflies. The butterflies were practically the same as the harmonious Morus albas Su Ming had seen. It caused his heart to tremble. Suddenly, he turned his head to the right, for he caught sight of a figure appear out of nowhere there. It belonged to a middle-aged man dressed in a long blue robe. He looked wary, and moments later, his gaze fell on Su Ming and the altar beneath his feet. When the middle-aged man swept his gaze past Su Ming, he had managed to tell his level of cultivation, which was betrayed by a smile that immediately appeared on his face. He walked to Su Ming while spreading out his cultivation base out of his body. It told Su Ming that the person was a powerful warrior in the 4th level of Tao spirit realm. Su Ming cast a look at the altar. There were about 100,000 of them in the 1st layer. Without saying a word, he turned around, intending to leave. He wanted to observe the strange world a little more, and there was no need for him to stop for a long time for one altar anyway. When he saw that Su Ming was about to leave, the middle-aged man smiled faintly, but right when he was about to step onto the altar, he narrowed his eyes and took another look at Su Ming, who was leaving the place. Your face. You are 7 Moons sect's 3rd prince. The middle-aged man jolted, and crazed delight appeared in his eyes. He no longer paid any attention to the altar, but instead, turned into a long arc that charged towards Su Ming. Ha ha! Today my luck is great. Not only did I find an altar, I also the 3rd prince with a bounty on his head set by one Tao sect and Azura clan. You are merely in the 3rd level of Tao spirit realm. Today, I am destined to receive my serendipity. When the middle-aged man's laughter echoed in the air, his body turned into a long arc that charged towards Su Ming. A light crease appeared on Su Ming's brow, and his lips curled up in a cold sneer. He had intended to leave, but since the middle-aged man did not want him to leave, but wished to die instead. If Su Ming did not grant his wish, he would definitely not leave the man satisfied. I can try out the space whip. When Su Ming lifted his right hand, the red thread on his wrist disappeared. The sky immediately roared, and a huge shadow of a whip that seemed to have been formed by stars descended on the ground. When it surrounded Su Ming, the middle-aged man's expression changed. He came to a swift halt before he began moving backwards. A hint of shock appeared on his face, which had become solemn. He formed a seal with his hands, and an armor appeared on his body. He also called upon 10 layers of light screens formed by runes. But even so, the instant Su Ming swung his whip, booming sounds rang out in the air. The 10 layers of runes instantly fell apart, and the armor crumbled as well. The middle-aged man coughed up blood when the whip touched his body. His mind was swiftly thrown into chaos, as if the whip had not just struck his body, but had also entered his mind and thrown his thoughts into disarray. After he coughed up blood, a shrill scream of pain came out of his mouth. With a single move, Su Ming closed in on the man. When he lifted his right hand, the mark of the crescent moon on his palm shone, and he pushed it at the center of the man's brow. At the instant Su Ming's right hand came into contact with the man's forehead, a huge suction force erupted from the palm. The middle-aged man's pain scream immediately reached an incredibly shrill degree, and his body withered in a moment. A large amount of life force and cultivation base surged into the mark on Su Ming's palm in just the span of a few breaths, and as the shrill screams grew weaker until they disappeared, the middle-aged man was reduced to only an emaciated and withered corpse before Su Ming. His soul and everything about him had left his body. Su Ming's expression was calm. He had the old man's divine ability, the mark, the space whip, the wills of the 4 great true worlds, and even his level of cultivation was just slightly weaker than that of the middle-aged man. If he could only win after fighting against him for a while, he would not be Su Ming. He pulled his right hand back, and when the red thread appeared on his wrist, he took a step and returned to the altar he just left. When he stood on it, he lifted his left hand, and a jade slip appeared in his hand, which he pushed against the trunk of the petrified tree. The jade slip immediately shone, and the petrified tree on the altar looked life force had returned to its body. It started to gradually resurrect. When it returned to life, a mild fragrance spread out. Su Ming took a sniff of it, and his eyes immediately shone. He noticed that once he took a whiff of that fragrance, his level of cultivation had increased a little bit. With that fragrance around, his Dao spirit in his third eye felt very comfortable. His fourth overlapping Dao spirit had manifested a little more as well. Jiu Tai had never talked about this before, but based on logic, it was impossible for him not to mention that the altars could increase their levels of cultivation. After all, even if he did not say it, Su Ming would notice it. Because of that, there could only be one explanation for the unexpected situation. A brilliant sparkle immediately appeared in Su Ming's eyes. Could it be that this fragrance doesn't help other people's level of cultivation? Su Ming's eyes shone. When about 20 breaths passed, the petrified tree on the altar returned to its best state. A pillar of light then shot into the sky. It could be seen even from the distance. Since the moment it appeared, Su Ming saw quite a few others charge into the sky. Those pillars of light meant that there were quite a few altars that had been activated at that moment. The pillars of light would exist eternally. However, they could be replaced by other sects and clans at any time, so once they appeared, they were like beacons of light to people from the other sects and clans. Su Ming sank into a brief period of pensive silence, thinking about the fragrance appeared when the altar was activated. He then charged into the distance, checking the jade slip along the way to head to the gathering spot for the cultivators of 7 Moons sect based on the guide, and on the way, he searched for altars. After the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, an altar that had been activated showed up ahead of Su Ming. There was a young man who had a jade slip pressed against a petrified tree, which was already partially resurrected. There were 4 other cultivators beside him dressed in the same manner as him who were fighting to the death against 4 others, preventing them from interfering with the young man's actions. Once Su Ming saw this, his eyes sparkled, and he turned into a long arc that charged to the ground. He traveled so fast that in just the span of a few breaths, he arrived among the 8 people fighting against each other. His level of cultivation surpassed theirs by a lot, and the moment he closed in, their expressions changed. It was especially so for the young man who was activating the altar, for even his pupils shrank in fear. Booming sounds echoed in the air. Su Ming's arrival had stirred up a huge gust of wind that blew away all 8 of the dueling cultivators. His body seemed to have turned into an afterimage when he appeared on the altar. He lifted his right hand, swung it, and immediately, the young man, who was already halfway into activating the altar, coughed up blood. He moved back swiftly without hesitation, and when he glared at Su Ming with a hateful gaze, he saw Su Ming standing on the altar with a jade slip on his left hand. He pushed it against the tree. The 8 people who were blown off turned their heads around and left in silence, not bothering to stay back. Even the young man with the hateful look did not say anything, choosing to leave immediately. When the 20 breaths were over, a pillar of light appeared on the altar where Su Ming was. It shot into the sky, and when the sweet-smelling fragrance spread out, Su Ming sensed his cultivation base change again. A fierce glare appeared in his eyes, and when the fragrance disappeared, he turned into a long arc that charged into the distance. An hour later, Su Ming had passed multiple altars in the first layer. He tried to leave 7 Moons Sect's brand on the altars which had been activated with his jade slip, but while he had managed to change the pillar of light's color, no fragrance spread out, and it made Su Ming understand that the altars would only release it during the initial activation. It seemed like a wave of spiritual aura had accumulated over a long period of time in the altar and was released once it was activated. That spiritual aura was useless to others, but to Su Ming, it was an incredibly valuable supplement. He made some detailed calculations in his head. If he could activate all 100,000 altars, then the aura he could absorb would be enough for his cultivation to increase by a level. But that was quite impossible. However, they were still in the first layer. There was also the second and third layers. A brilliant sparkle shone in Su Ming's eye, and his heart had already become invigorated. Chapter 1438. Cut the Tao Paragon. Su Ming did not give up on the matter of meeting at the rendezvous spot with 7 Moons Sect so that he could increase his level of cultivation and his Tao Spirit's aura by being the first to activate the altars. After all, great Tao Paragons from the 7 sects and 12 clans could enter the first layer. If he made a spectacle of himself, it would be difficult for him to not draw attention to himself. And with Su Ming's identity, if he attracted too much attention in the first layer, he would run into dangers threatening his life. If he met a great Tao Paragon, the dangers they posed would be especially great to Su Ming. Which was why while the route Su Ming took seemed to be ever-changing, he was still rushing to the gathering spot of 7 Moons Sect based on the guidelines provided in the Jade Slip. However, he would pay attention to his surroundings on the way to keep a lookout for altars that had yet to be activated. When 12 hours were gone, it was 1/6 of the 72 hours provided to them in the first layer. As Su Ming charged forward, including the initial 2 he activated, he had already performed the initial activation for 7 altars. This number was already very high for a cultivator, but Su Ming seldom fought against others. He only did it to get the altars, and his eyes would shine with a cold glare at that time. As he charged forward, he would occasionally check his jade slip. The spot where he was located was no longer far away from the rendezvous spot of 7 Moons Sect. He could reach it in about 4 hours. Moments later, however, Su Ming suddenly came to a swift halt. His gaze fell on a sunken landmark. It was an altar which had yet to be activated, but when Su Ming saw it, he narrowed his eyes slightly. About 12 hours had passed, and while there were still altars which had yet to be activated in the first layer of the Shattered Dimension, there weren't many of them, and most of those were in rather obscure places. The altar before Su Ming, however, was in a very obvious place, and it was impossible for no one to have found it till then. Su Ming swept his gaze past the area, but he only stopped for a moment before he turned his head around instead. He charged forward, intending to leave. That place was clearly a trap. At the instant Su Ming was about to leave, a cold chuckle came from the altar. A figure dressed in a daoist robe appeared from behind it. The man's gaze was like lightning, and when looked coldly at Su Ming, he took a step forward and closed in on him in an instant. "Since you saw my altar, it won't be so easy for you leave." A dark and cold voice echoed in the air, and a presence belonging to Tao Paragons was instantly released by the figure in the daoist robe. The weather changed, the ground trembled, and that powerful presence instantly covered a circular area of 10,000 lees. The expression of the cultivators in the area changed the moment they noticed it, and they quickly fled. Su Ming frowned. The presence belonging to Tao Paragons made him scowl, and he wanted to swiftly leave the area with the feng shui compass. But a thought appeared in his head at that moment, and he gave up on the idea. Instead, he turned around and cast a cold glare at the approaching figure. It was an old man with an aquiline nose. The Daoist robe he wore was in black and white, the colors of the yin-yang sign. It did not belong to one Dao sect or Azura clan, but dualism sect. "I wonder, what business do you have with me, senior?" Su Ming asked flatly, and the incoming old man laughed coldly. Just as he was about to speak, he swept his gaze past Su Ming's body and was suddenly stunned. Su Ming chose that moment to bring his right hand up, and the space whip immediately replaced the sky, turning it dark. At the same time, the shadow of the whip closed in on the old man before descending on him. A loud bang shot up into the air. When Su Ming cracked the whip, he did not move back, but instead charged forward. Another loud bang followed after, causing the ground to tremble. Su Ming fell back, and blood trickled down the corners of his mouth. Once he landed on the ground, he lifted his head and clenched his right fist to throw a punch at the billowing dust before him. Su Ming's will and his power in Dao spirit realm were gathered in that punch. The moment he threw it forward, the old man in the Daoist robe roared in anger from the dust fog. He instantly moved away. He looked rather disheveled, since his robes had already been torn to reveal a red whip mark. His eyes were red, and there was a faint hint of absent-mindedness in them. At that moment, he seemed to have forcefully suppressed that absent-minded state. A large amount of white fog surrounded him before it turned into a huge centipede in the air. That centipede was entirely white, and with a ferocious look, it charged toward Su Ming, crashing straight into his punch. Booming sounds surged into the sky, and Su Ming coughed up blood. He moved back, and the white centipede shuddered. It became slightly duller, but it still charged toward Su Ming with killing intent. That was the power of a Dao paragon. It was still something that Su Ming could not hope to win against, but if a Dao paragon wanted to kill him, it would not be easy for them to do so. The moment the centipede closed in on him, a fierce glare appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he said flatly, "White 5. The instant he said that name, a white figure appeared in front of him at an indescribable speed and crashed straight into the incoming centipede of fog. Booming sounds shook the sky and earth, and the centipede of fog instantly crumbled to pieces. The old man's expression changed, and a grave look appeared in his eyes. He stared straight at the huge white dog which had appeared in front of Su Ming. The white dog was also glaring at the old man with a fierce look. He knew this person, and they were even briefly acquainted to him in the past, but right then, White 5 just felt livid. After all, if Su Ming died, the 5 of them would all die with him. There was no way for them to run away from it. Right then, forget that White 5 had been acquainted with the old man before. Even if they were from the same sect, White 5 would still attack him without hesitation. It opened its mouth wide and let out a howl before it charged forth, straight at the old man. "What is this spirit beast?" The old man's pupils shrank, and his heart trembled. He could tell that the white dog had the power of a Dao paragon, and it left him in a state of disbelief. Such spirit beasts were incredibly rare in ancient Zong, but in the blink of an eye, he found an answer to his own question. With 7 moons sex power, it was not impossible for them to obtain such a spirit beast for the third prince. No matter what, an animal is just an animal. The old man laughed coldly. When he lifted his right hand, a layer of frost appeared under his feet. It soon cracked, as if numerous centipedes had appeared under his feet. White 5 barked then, and a huge bronze cauldron appeared around him. It had numerous pictures of various fierce creatures. The next moment, the pictures on the cauldron came to life. They filled the sky and charged at the old man, whose pupils had shrank even more and who was slightly shocked. At that moment, Su Ming spoke faintly. "White 1. When he said that name, a ray of white light came charging in from behind the old man. At the moment he noticed it, the old man was stunned to his feet. He has one more. And it's also a Dao paragon." The old man's heart let out a thump, and he immediately wanted to retreat. The desire to escape had arisen in him right then. When White 1 and White 5 charged at him, Su Ming's gaze was full of powerful killing intent. He could already sense that White 3 and White 4 were not far from him. They would close in on them around 10 breaths later. Only White 3 was slightly further away. Chapter 1439. Cut the Tao Paragon Boom. When a loud bang resounded in the air, it stirred up the world and caused the air to distort. When countless ripples spread out, the old man coughed up blood and fell backwards. After him, two white figures charged forth. Naturally, they were White 1 and White 5. These two white dogs were Tao Paragons, and when they charged, their divine abilities filled the air. The old man suddenly felt like he was not facing two spirit beasts, but two Tao Paragons who were at the same level of cultivation as him, just with bizarre forms. Damn it, where did Seven Moons sect get these two incredibly valuable spirit beasts? Damn it. The old man's face was incredibly dark, but he did not have time to even wipe off the blood at the corners of his mouth. At that moment, he could only think about fleeing instead of how to kill Su Ming. The only thought in his mind was to leave as quickly as possible. He could engage in a fight with a single white dog, but when two of them appeared, the old man knew that it was completely impossible for him to kill Su Ming, unless the two white dogs did not possess high intelligence. Only then would he stand a chance, but when they exchanged blows, the old man immediately felt his heart tremble, because he had the feeling that the two spirit beasts were just like cultivators. When he retreated, a cold sneer appeared at the corners of Su Ming's lips. Killing intent shone in his eyes, and when he took a step forward, he charged towards the old man. The old man stared at Su Ming, and his speed of withdrawal grew even faster. Today, I will let you leave. Now get out of my sight. The old man might have been shocked and felt apprehensive at the two dogs' level of cultivation, but he still had an arrogant look on his face. When he spoke, his air of self-assumed superiority was still present. He was certain that the third prince's level of cultivation was not high enough. Even with the two white dogs, the third prince would not dare to pursue him too tightly, and he would definitely not want to stall for time either. After all, he had a unique status. If he stayed in one place for too long, he would attract other people's attention. This was something the third prince would not want to face. Because of that, the old man was certain that the third prince would give up on making things hard for him. But I don't want to let you leave, Su Ming said in a flat voice while rushing forward with killing intent shining in his eyes. The old man snorted coldly, but right when he did so, he sensed two more Tao Paragons' presences charging over from different directions. There are already other Tao Paragons coming to this place. Since you don't know what's good for you, you might as well never leave this place again. The old man chuckled coldly, but he did not stop and continued retreating. He wanted to wait until the two other cultivators with the presences of Tao Paragons arrived. As long as they were not from Seven Moons sect, the third prince would surely face a disaster. A glint shone in Su Ming's eyes, and his lips curled up into a faint smile. When the old man saw his expression, his eyes immediately shrank. An ominous feeling rose in his heart when he saw two rays of white light charge towards them. Within those two rays of white light were two large white dogs. At the moment he saw them clearly, the old man's expression changed drastically. His heart trembled in a manner of a monstrous storm. He felt that his eyes were playing tricks on him. When he looked forward swiftly, he found that the two white dogs which were previously beside Su Ming were still around. F4. That's impossible. How could it be possible for anyone to find four spirit beasts who look exactly the same in all of ancient Zong, and they're all Tao Paragons to boot? The old man's heart was filled with shock at that moment. Without any hesitation, he bit the tip of his tongue, coughed up a mouthful of blood, and used all his cultivation base to flee swiftly. He could no longer fight. No matter how conceited he was, he did not have the courage to fight against four white dogs who shared the same level of cultivation as him. In fact, a powerful sense that he was about to die had already risen from the depths of his heart. It was not Su Ming's disaster, but his. At the instant he moved in a flash and was about to leave into the distance, Su Ming lifted his right hand, and the space whip immediately replaced the sky. It charged towards the old man, and with a loud bang, it struck him. With the hit stalling him, the four white lights immediately rushed up at him. They were so fast that the old man simply did not have time to flee. With bloodshot eyes, he growled, and loud booming sounds shook the sky and earth, stirring up dust fog that swept outwards in every direction. The old man coughed up blood, and his right arm shattered. He let out a shrill cry, and 9 jade slips that had appeared in front of him at some unknown point in time crumbled to dust. With the power brought forth by the jade slips when they broke, his body was sent flying backwards. The 4 white dogs charged forth again and were about to close in on the old man, and despair showed up in his eyes. At that moment, the feng shui compass suddenly manifested under Su Ming's feet and rushed forward. The feng shui compass charged forth at a speed that made even Su Ming's heart tremble. It was so fast that Su Ming instantly surpassed the 4 white dogs. In fact, before the old man could even notice him, Su Ming had already appeared in front of him. At that moment, it was as if Su Ming had forced his way and occupied the old man's eyes. His reflection had completely overtaken the old man's pupils. The old man was stunned. The next moment, Su Ming lifted his right hand and pushed his palm at the spot between the old man's eyebrows. At the same time, the 4 white dogs arrived simultaneously. Booming sounds shot into the air, and the old man's limbs were all clamped down tightly between the 4 white dogs' jaws. Their teeth sank deep into the old man's flesh, and immediately, the old man's cultivation base was sealed, causing him to be unable to move even the slightest bit. He widened his eyes, which went red from terror. The old man let out a shrill scream of pain which spread through a circular area of 10,000 lees. The hearts of the cultivators who had left trembled, and they quickly went even farther away. As the screams of pain continued, the old man's body rapidly withered away. His life force, cultivation base, and even his soul all charged into Su Ming's body through the brand on his right palm. Su Ming's injuries quickly recovered. In the blink of an eye, he was completely healed. When he let go of the old man's shrill screams had already disappeared, and he had turned into a mummy. The brand of the crescent moon on Su Ming's palm was shining with a dark light at that moment. While Su Ming could absorb the old man's cultivation base, he could not use it to increase his own. He could only use it to heal his injuries. However, he could gather the old man's cultivation base on the brand, accumulating it to deliver a strike that would be equivalent to one that could be used by the old man was at the peak of his form. Su Ming cast the mummy a cold glance, then looked away and took a step forward towards the altar that had yet to be activated. 20 breaths later, when a pillar of light shot into the sky from the altar, a bright light shone in Su Ming's eyes. He turned around and brought the 4 white dogs with him to turn into long arcs that charged into the distance. The return of the 4 white dogs allowed Su Ming to relax. As long as he did not run into any great Dao paragons, there would be no cultivators who could stop him. Just endure a little more. Once we get to the 2nd layer, no great Dao paragon will be able to step into that place, and at that time, I will be able to fight for the altars. Su Ming's eyes sparkled. Even though some people would definitely use other methods to enter the 2nd and 3rd layers in the battle of Dao verification and would be able to equip themselves with combat prowess that far surpassed their levels of cultivation, just like Su Ming did with his 5 white dogs, Su Ming was still rather confident that he could have the world at the palm of his hand when he was in the 2nd and 3rd layers. In truth, that was indeed the case. For 7 Moons sect, the hardest was the 1st layer, because all the great Dao paragons from each sect would appear in this layer, and it was impossible for 7 Moons sect to obtain any sort of advantage. However, it was different in the 2nd layer. If no accidents occurred in the 2nd layer, then with Gu Tai's level of cultivation, he could stand superior to all others. I still need to be careful in the 1st layer. As Su Ming thought that, he brought the 4 white dogs into the distance. When 2 more hours passed, Su Ming looked at the jade slip before him. Based on the markers on the slip, he would need about 2 more hours before he could get to 7 Moon sect's rendezvous point. Right then, there were all sorts of fights in the 1st layer. Pillars of light appeared in the world, and from the distance, Su Ming found that there were 100,000 of them. Clearly, all of them had been activated, and right then, all the sects and clans were fighting for them. Su Ming shifted his gaze away and charged forward, but right then, his heart suddenly trembled. He had a feeling that someone had set their sights on him. When their gaze landed on him, Su Ming felt his heart tremble in fear. A faint voice traveled out of empty air, and right after, a figure walked out. It was a teenager who appeared to be about 13 or 14 years old. He was dressed in a long white robe, and when he walked out of the air, he looked at Su Ming with a grin. I am 1 Dao sect's Lin Dong Dong. Greetings, 3rd Prince. The teenager might have seemed young, but there was an ancient tone to his voice. When he spoke, the world around Su Ming showed signs of freezing, as if it had been sealed. Great Tao Paragon. Only great Tao Paragons would possess this sort of power. This was not the first time Su Ming had met a great Tao Paragon. Sen Mu was not the first great Tao Paragon he met when that person came to Seven Moons sect either. In truth, the first great Tao Paragon Su Ming met was Immortal Qing Han, but since the old man had been around, Immortal Qing Han had been reduced to an incredibly pathetic state. Still, Su Ming had never underestimated the great Tao Paragons of ancient Zhanghuo, numbered to less than 30 because of it. It could be said that each great Tao Paragon was a powerful warrior who stood at the peak of ancient Zong. Without the 9th level Tao gods, the great Tao Paragons were at the peak of the level of cultivation. Third Prince, why are you in such a hurry? Since we met, we must be bound by destiny. Why don't you come with me? When the teenager spoke with a smile, he walked to Su Ming in the sky. With each step he took, the world would tremble. In fact, if he wanted to, it seemed as if with just one thought, he could flip the world over its head. Su Ming was silent. The pupils of the 4 white dogs beside him had already shrunk. The world around him had been sealed, which seemed to say that his fate of encountering a life-threatening disaster was already set in stone. When the teenager began to walk over, Su Ming lifted his head. He brought his right hand up and pushed down at the area before his feet. With it, the most powerful strike from the old man which Su Ming had bound into the brand on his right palm immediately erupted with a bang. At the same time, the 4 white dogs howled. They brought forth their strongest power and delivered their most powerful strike at the frozen world. Chapter 1440. The second layer. When Su Ming attacked and the 4 white dogs delivered their strongest hit, the world around Su Ming looked like it was about to crumble. A large amount of contortions appeared, and Su Ming rushed forth. At that moment, the feeling that the area had been sealed became much weaker, but right when he was about to escape, the teenager smiled with his expression as calm as ever. He took a step forward, and immediately, the world instantly froze again. The effect quickly enveloped a circular area of nearly 1 million li's. The world in 1 million li's has been frozen. How will you escape? When the teenager said those words with a smile, there was a hint of derision in his eyes. Perhaps you can try to escape, if you like a game of chase, that is. As the teenager spoke, he did not immediately approach Su Ming. Instead, he took a few steps to the side, opening the path ahead for Su Ming. Hey, I'll give you 10 breaths. 10 breaths later, I'll first kill the white dogs beside you. With each 10 breaths, I will kill one of them, and 40 breaths later, I will capture you. There was still a smile on the teenager's face, but his aloof tone caused a murderous glare to shine in Su Ming's eyes. 1. The teenager shook his head. At the moment he spoke, the feng shui compass appeared under Su Ming's feet. It grew larger at a very rapid pace, and in the blink of an eye, it grew to be 100 feet big. The runic symbols on it protruded on the surface and began shining. With one thought from Su Ming, the feng shui compass immediately buzzed and shot forward. The feng shui compass speed was supposed to be extremely fast, but when the world around it had been frozen, it felt as if countless threads had surrounded it, preventing it from traveling too quickly. Su Ming could still hear the teenager's voice echo in his ears. 2, 3, 4. As the feng shui compass charged forward, the feeling of being toyed around caused Su Ming's expression to turn dark. The killing intent in his heart had already become incredibly strong, but the disparity in their strength gave him no way to vent his killing intent, even though it had already become so strong that it was boiling in him. 10. The voice said. When Su Ming turned his head around, he saw the teenager appear right behind himself, and his right hand was already around White One's neck. He shot a smile at Su Ming and squeezed the dog, but right then, madness appeared in White One's eyes, and it instantly chose to self-destruct. Booming sounds reverberated through the air and turned into a powerful wave of impact that swept up Su Ming and his feng shui compass, immediately pushing them into the distance. It also put the teenager in direct line of fire. His robes fluttered rapidly, but he still remained standing at the spot where the impact was the strongest. A hint of astonishment appeared in his eyes. It can self-destruct? This isn't a spirit beast. This is a cultivator? When the teenager mumbled those words under his breath, his eyes shone swiftly. Clearly, even someone like him had not expected that the white dogs beside Su Ming would be cultivators. Red appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He did not say a single word, but his heart was already overflowing with killing intent. White One might have been his enemy in the past, but ever since the old man turned him into a white dog, it has been very respectful to Su Ming. Yet right before Su Ming's eyes, it was forced to self-destruct. This scene would not have affected Su Ming's heart before, but the feeling of helplessness in the face of the powerful caused him to remember harmonious Morris Alba, where all the people he cared about had died under Xianxong's single hit. At that time, he had also been powerless. Once that feeling rose in him, it caused Su Ming to throw his head back and let out a shrill cry as his feng shui compass charged forward. One Dao sect. One Dao sect. White One's self-destruction created a wave of impact that was beyond the teenager's expectations. While it could not affect him, it pushed Su Ming and the feng shui compass out of the sealed world. His speed increased exponentially, and in the blink of an eye, he was already 100,000 li's away. You sure run fast. But, the teenager lifted his head and looked at the spot where Su Ming had fled to with a cold glare. His lips curled up into a chilling smile. With one step, he moved, intending to give chase, but suddenly, he came to a stop. Around him, or more accurately speaking in an area of 1 million li's around him, snowflakes had started floating down. Once they appeared, a chilling presence immediately filled the entire area. Su Ming had been 100,000 li's away as the feng shui compass continued charging forward by then, but he too saw the snowflakes drifting down. Today, I will repay my debt to you for not going through the door on that day. From now on, we owe each other nothing. A woman's voice rang out in the world, and Su Ming recognized it. It belonged to immortal Qing Han. When her voice echoed in the air, the snowflakes in the area of 1 million li's instantly swept past Su Ming to form a huge wall of ice and snow behind him. At the same time, the seal in the world of 1 million li's crumbled, allowing the speed of Su Ming's feng shui compass to instantly recover. I see, so it's immortal Qing Han. It's been a long while. But you actually stopped me? Could it be that you are somewhat interested in them? When the teenager's voice traveled languidly, Su Ming had fled into the distance on his feng shui compass. By his ears, he heard immortal Qing Han's faint and aloof voice. I owe this person a debt of kindness. Fellow Daoist Lin, I hope you do not mind to please step down. Su Ming could not hear the subsequent conversation. The feng shui compass charged through the world and left into the distance. While sitting on it, Su Ming remained silent, but the madness and killing intent had become so strong that it filled his entire body. His murderous aura reached a monstrous degree. I will definitely obtain the phala, and once I eat it, I will obtain the power of a Dao paragon, and will never have to feel this powerless again. One Dao sect. One Dao sect. Until the day I will destroy you, I will not rest even if I die. I cannot hope to stand against great Dao paragons, but when I'm in the second and third layers, I will definitely make one Dao sect pay. Once I become a Dao paragon, I will go and find Lin Dong Dong, and I will make him suffer the consequences. The killing intent in Su Ming's was astonishing. When he thought about those things in his heart, he saw the gathering spot for 7 Moons sect in the distance. There were only 80,000 out of the 200,000 cultivators from 7 Moons sect at that spot. Jiu Tai was also there. When everyone saw the feng shui compass with Su Ming, their gazes immediately gathered on it. Immediately after, Jiu Tai sensed the incredible killing intent surging around Su Ming. He did not ask Su Ming about it. All sorts of things happened in the chaotic first layer. It was not a bad matter either, since only when it happened could a person's bloodlust be triggered. When Su Ming approached 7 Moon sect's gathering spot, the feng shui compass under his body vanished, and he charged to the people of 7 Moon sect. Once he drew close to them, he did not speak, but instead chose to sit down on the ground with his eyes closed to suppress the murderous intent that was on the verge of explosion in his heart. As time trickled by, Jiu Tai and all the great sect elders of 7 Moon sect would occasionally lead some people to venture outwards. Jiu Tai's jade slip flashed non-stop, sending his messages to the sects and clans which had formed a union with 7 Moon sect. With the strength of the union gathered together, 7 Moon sect was guaranteed to smoothly enter the second layer. In the blink of an eye, 20-something hours passed. The limit of 72 hours was fast approaching. Jiu Tai's expression became more solemn, and the 7 Moons sect disciples in the area continued coming in and leaving without stop. Sometimes, there would be about 100,000 something people in the gathering spot, and at other times, there would only be thousands of them. When the final 2 hours arrived, the number of disciples in 7 Moons sect had already dwindled to less than 100,000. More than half of them had died. Even though their bodies could not be seen, but based on the other people's expressions, it was easy to tell that the battles had been incredibly devastating. It could be said that the 100,000 pillars of light in the world were changing ownership every half an hour, yet no sect or clan managed to have 50,000 altars in their possession. Once the final, most critical 2 hours passed, the 100,000 pillars of light in the first layer swayed. Moments later, a huge vortex formed in the sky. When it rotated with loud bangs, a huge black hole appeared within it. Right after, nearly 30,000 of the 100,000 pillars of light instantly extinguished. At the same time, a powerful suction force came out from the black hole. It did not descend onto the ground, but only to the region where one Dao sect was, bringing all the cultivators from one Dao sect into the black hole in the vortex. Then, another 30,000 pillars of light extinguished. Azura clan became the second clan who had the right to step into the second layer. Once the cultivators from Azura clan flew into the black hole, the third sect who had the right to enter was revealed. It was 7 Moons sect. More than 10,000 pillars of light lost their light, and 7 Moons sect, including Su Ming, immediately sensed the suction force from the vortex in the sky. Their bodies instantly flew up and headed to the black hole. There were only 30,000 something pillars of light left after 7 Moons sect was gone, and there was no longer any sect or clan who had more than 10,000 pillars of light in their possession. This was not because their sects or clans did not have enough power, but because this time, due to the existence of the 3 camps in the battle of Dao verification and the competition between successors, which led to the exchange of mutual benefits, those sects and clans had given up on the chance to participate in the battle. Or else, with how much one Dao sect and Azura clan were trying to stop 7 Moons sect, it would have been very difficult for 7 Moons sect to earn the right to enter the second layer. At that moment, only one Dao sect, Azura clan, and 7 Moons sect were in the second layer. They would launch a crazed battle there, and from then on, the disciples of the sect or clan who won the battle would become the first to enter the third layer. After all, the disciples who became the first to enter the third layer would have a much greater chance to obtain the Phala. It would mean that they had gained the initiative. If they could turn that initiative into an advantage step by step, then they would naturally be successful in seizing the Phala. One Dao sect. Once nearly 400,000 cultivators from the sects and clans stepped into the second layer, they were split up like in the first layer. Killing intent flashed in Su Ming's eyes. When he looked around himself, he saw that the second layer was no longer a vast empty wasteland like the first layer. Instead, there were countless rocks floating in the sky. Those floating stones seemed to be connected to the sky, and there was no end to them. Clearly, everyone had to step on the stones to charge to the sky.